Hey everyone, today I'm going to do a detailed sewing tutorial for a pair of slippers. And the pattern is in my Etsy shop. I'm going to leave a link to the pattern and a link to my shop down in the show notes below and in the comments section. So I'm going to scroll down and you can see here it says sewing patterns. I'm going to click on that and it brings up my sewing patterns. And today we are going to do the easy slipper sewing pattern. There are 10 sizes in this pattern ranging from 5-inch feet to 14-inch feet. And the pattern includes all of them. So let's get started and make a pair of slippers. Okay, to get started, I did print my pattern out actual size and cut it out along the solid black lines. There's no need to add a seam allowance. And then I'm going to tape these two pieces together. You can see here there is a shaded area. So I'm just going to put this on top. And you can see that the hash lines of this pattern mostly match. So just give it a piece of tape. And each slipper pattern has two pieces. You get the sole and the top. And one of the things I really like about this pattern is that you can use just about any fabric to create slippers. So for example, a throw pillow cover, which I like these a lot because you get the inside and the outside on a lot of different throw pillows. And you can get these for just a couple dollars at the thrift store and then use the stuffing from inside for a different project. And you can see here, this is a tapestry fabric and I just lined it with a little muslin. And this one is another throw pillow. So it's nice and fluffy. It's got some good texture on it. So those, and then you can also use a fleece, and the Walmart near me is doing a renovation. So they put a bunch of their fabrics on sale. And this one was marked $1.50, and I actually got it for $1.09. So that's 1 yard. It's nothing special. It's an anti-pill fleece, but 1 yard for $1, which I think was a pretty good deal. I actually got a few of them. So those are sitting in my stash to make some Christmas or some holiday gifts. All right, so today for this tutorial, I'm going to use a cotton fabric. I do very much like paisley, so I'm going to do paisley. And I have two of the soles cut, one for the inside and one for the outside. Now, sometimes you can use like a suede type material or a leather type material, something that has grip on it. In fact, at the fabric store, they even make fabrics for the non-slip bottom of things like slippers. So just use whatever it is that works for your purpose. And with this, since this is going to be on the outside, I'm going to do right side down. And I want to make sure that I have a left foot and a right foot. Okay, so on top of that, I'm going to put my lining just like this. And you can see I have a notch on the inside to show where the inside of the foot is. And again, like I mentioned in my last video, you can cut the notches into the fabric or out of the fabric, however you choose to do it. There's no one right way to do it. And that's the way I do it, is to the outside, because I typically sew with a very shallow seam allowance and I don't want the notches to get in the way of my seam. All right, so I've got my outsides and my insides, and they're lined on top of each other. And I'm just going to put some pins in here to keep it stabilized when I actually go to sew it. Just put a couple pins in here. And I have quite a few of these. I used to sell at the farmer's market, my handmade goods, and I don't do that anymore because the fees to actually set up a booth are outrageous. And I'm not willing to raise the price of my handmade goods in order to go set up at a farmer's market. It takes a lot of energy to pack all that stuff up in my car and then drag it to a spot, which is never where my car is parked, and then set up a tent and set up tables, and then the process of tearing everything down. I just don't find that I make a lot of money doing that. So keep them to the side. I'm sure I'll have an opportunity to sell them at some point. All right, I've got my soles pinned together. So I'm just going to set those aside until I'm ready for them. And now I'm going to start on the tops. And the same thing, I have 2 of the insides and 2 of the outsides. And I'm going to lay them one on top of the other with right sides facing. Now my lining doesn't really have a right side, so in this case, it doesn't really matter. So right sides together like this. And before I pin them together, I'm actually going to take them to the ironing board and give them a nice little press to make sure that all of the edges are even. Okay, so I'm going to do that. Okay, I took it to the ironing board, and what I was really paying attention to is how the fabrics lined up on the inside, because this is the first place that's going to be sewn. So I made sure that these all matched up, and you can see that they're not cut exactly. There's some fabrics that don't match, and that's fine. I'm not going to pay attention to that until I fold them right side out. So I've got the insides matched up, and now I'm going to sew those. So I'm going to take them to the sewing machine, and with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, I'm going to sew just the inside. Right, I sewed just the inside. And you can't really see it because I sewed it with white thread, but in the rounded portion so that when I turn it right side out, it'll do it smoothly without any puckers. I'm just going to give it a few snips, and I'm not going to snip too close to the thread because then it can undo the stitching. But this will just allow it to turn right side out a little better. There are some different ways to clip your seam allowance. One is to leave a gap. I just do it like this, and I find that it works just fine. Just like so many things in sewing, there are people who tell you there is a right way to do things. But you know, the right way to do it is whatever works best for you. And this is what works best for me. So I just give it a little clip. Okay. And now I'm going to turn them right side out. And it is a little wonky, so you just have to work with it. Okay. So it's right side out, and I'm going to take it over to the ironing board and make sure that this inside seam is pressed really nicely. Okay, so I'll be right back. All right, so I used the iron to give it a nice crease, a nice press. And now before I move on to the next step, I'm going to trim these areas where the fabrics do not line up, because when I attach the slipper to the sole, I want to make sure that I'm getting the lining and the outside of the fabric attached to the sole. And it's a lot easier to do that when they are the same size. So I'm going to give it a trim, and then I'm going to flip it over, and you can see there are areas on the back where there isn't a good matchup. So I'm going to trim those as well. I think I have probably 4 or 5 pairs of these that I keep around the house that I wear regularly. And the ones that I made out of upholstery fabric have lasted several years. The ones out of cotton, they tend to degrade pretty quickly, especially if I wear them outside, which I do sometimes. So they do make really good gifts, and the pattern has multiple sizes, and this new pattern that I'm publishing with this video actually has children's sizes as well. So the sizing is a little different. This is one of the things that people email me a lot about, and that's sizes. If you have ever been shopping for a pair of jeans, you know that American sizes do not mean anything. It's according to the brand. And shoes are no different. I have shoes that are 8.5s, 9s, 9.5s, and 10s. So in order to allow people to have a good fit, I have posted the measurements of these patterns from toe to heel, the inches and the centimeters. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that's how they do it in Europe anyway. They measure the foot in centimeters. So you might have a size 40 shoe, whereas in the United States, they call them 8s and 9s or whatever. So in order to get a good measurement, you want to measure from the toe to the heel of the person that you are creating the slipper for. And if you don't know the size of their foot, why don't you take yourself with a tape measure down to a shoe store or any place that sells shoes and measure from the toe to the heel of the shoe, and that's the size that you would make. Okay, so that should clear up about the sizing of the pattern. All right, so I did put some pins in here to hold it steady, but I'm going to take the pins out of the end because this is where I'm going to sew next. I want to unfold the outside from the lining, and I'm going to match up the seam right here. And especially if I'm using a thick material, I want to make sure that that seam allowance is open on both sides. So with the seam allowance open, try to measure it up as best I can. I'm going to put a pin there. Okay. And then I'll measure up the end of the outside and give that a pin. And then the end of the outside on the other one and give that a pin. All right, now I'm going to take this to the machine, and with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, I'm going to sew those together. Okay. Okay. So the heel has been sewn right here. And now I'm going to turn it right side out. But first, and especially if I have used really thick material, I just want to cut out the part where the fabrics overlap. It's really important if you're using an upholstery fabric or some really thick fabric to just cut that part out because it lessens the bulk on the heel. And it'll be more comfortable and easier to turn. So I'm going to turn it like this so that the seam allowances are matched up in the back. And I'll go ahead and put a pin in that to hold it. Okay. Now I have the top of my slipper. Let's do that with the other one. First, I'll clip out the seam allowance to lessen the bulk. Then I'll spread out the seam allowances. That also lessens the bulk. And then turn them on one another, line them up, and put a pin in it. Okay, Now you can see I have some overlappers here, so I'm just going to trim that up. Flip it to the other side and make sure that that's all trimmed up, because again, it makes it easier to fit all the layers of fabric to the sole if they are trimmed to the same length. Okay, let's do that on the other one. It's always important to flip it so that you can get a view of both sides. All right, there's the top. Okay, now we're going to connect the sole to the top. And I want to do this with right sides facing. So this is going to be on the outside. So I want it to be sewn on the inside. Everything gets done backwards. Okay, again with the top, this is going to be the outside. So it gets sewn on the inside. And I'm going to start with the back. So the heel seam is here, and I'm going to line that up with the notch on the end of the sole. Okay, so those get lined up, and I already have a pin here, so I'm going to use that pin to pin them together. Okay, and now I'm going to go around the outside and match up the sole with the top and give it a pin until the whole outside is pinned to the sole. And I'm going to pin every couple of inches because there are a lot of curves in putting this together. And I want to make sure that all the curves are matched up. Okay, so I got about halfway done on one side. And I'm going to go halfway up on the other side. Just because if the top and the bottom don't match, it's easier to adjust it at the toe than it is to take all the pins out and start over again. So one side and then the other, and I'll do the toe last. I do this a lot when I'm working with curved seams. You don't want to just go for it and assume that it's going to match, because it might not. This one actually does. And whether or not it matches has less to do with the pattern itself than it does the way that you cut your fabric. So the fabric has grains. Some go up and down, and some go side to side. They're called the weave and the weft. And if you cut them sideways like this, they have a tendency to pull a little bit more. So it depends on the way that you cut your fabric, the type of fabric that you're using, the tension with which you put the fabric through the machine. All of these things have a determination on whether or not your pattern pieces fit together. Okay, so there's one done. I'm going to go ahead and do the other one. And then I'm going to take it to the machine and I'm going to sew all the way around the outside. Okay, I sewed all the way around the outside with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And then I'm going to take the pins out. I already took the pins out of that one. So just make sure that you don't stick yourself with the pins on this one, because you can see there's pins underneath as well. So when you turn it right side out, just do it with caution, because I have poked myself too many times. All right, now around the edges where it is really curved, I'm just going to give it a few snips in the seam allowance. Again, this just helps it turn right side out a little better. Just be careful you don't snip the threads, because then your slippers won't last. So I go around the toe And then I do the heel as well, starting right up where it starts to curve. And right here where the seams meet, I do cut those out like that. And that helps with the bulk. Just makes the slipper more comfortable to wear too. Okay, now I'm going to be careful because you can see there's pins in here and I don't want to stick myself. So I'm going to do this slowly and carefully. There's also, actually before I do that, I should take the ones out of the sole first. So you can see they're in the sole here. I'll take those out. Then turn it. And then I'll only have the pins that are in the side. So here. This fabric makes it difficult to even see those pins. Okay, and just kind of arrange it that way. All right. One slipper. Okay. Take the pins out of the sole. Carefully turn it right side out so I don't poke myself. All right. Got a pair of slippers here, and you can see this pair of slippers is 9 inches. So maybe show you up here. 9 inches, so it goes from 8 to 17. Right here. Can you see numbers here? Here, let's do this. You can see 11 to 2. That's 9 inches. So 9 inches from toe to heel, and that's how you measure it. Okay, and you can tell which is the right and which is the left because it has a little notch on the inside of the foot. So there shouldn't be a question there unless you trim it and you can't see it anymore. So there we have it. A cute little pair of slippers. And what I like to do is put them sole to sole and then wrap a little ribbon around them and stick them in a Christmas stocking or in a gift basket with like bath bombs or other bath things, bath oils, Epsom salts, whatever. So just make yourself a little gift basket and stick a pair of homemade slippers in there. Okay. Happy sewing, guys, and I'll see you next time. You can check out the link for my Etsy shop that has lots of different types of patterns and ready-made products. The link will be in the show notes below this video or in the comments section. So go ahead and check that out.